what is really unfolding in the region. And it's an important perspective for us because we've been told for so long that Israel first needs to make peace with the Palestinians in order to have peace with the wider region. And for those of us on campus, we've been told a more radical message that we always fight back against as Hasbara fellows, which is that Israel needs to be boycotted until it makes peace with the Palestinians. And now we see a peace between Israel and several of its Arab neighbors, which is sort of turning the narrative on its head. And the more we learn about it, the more we can ask questions, the more better prepared we are as Hasbara fellows and as student leaders to discuss the issues on campus. So it's my pleasure to invite Michael and Jaideep to take the stage here. I'll add Michael has recently become a Hasbara member as well as joining the exclusive club of Hasbara supporters that sponsored a Hasbara student by sponsoring a scholarship. And so thank you, Michael, for doing that. And so you're kind of wearing two hats here as a Hasbara donor and as our guest speaker. And so thank you. I'll invite you up, and I'm going to ask you first to just tell us your story to both Jaideep and Michael. And but before I do, I'll just repeat to everyone in the audience, if you can just mute yourself if you haven't done already. And if you're with us on Zoom, please, you'll be able to raise your hand at the end to ask questions. If you're with us on the Bizibo platform streaming, you can always write in. You can send us an email at Max Mandel, mmandel@hasbarafellowships.org to ask a question. And those are the ground rules. And so, Michael, Jaideep, tell us first, what's the story? You signed the first deal of its kind with an Israeli venture capital firm investing in an Emirati startup. How did it happen? Why did you decide to do business together? How did you meet? Tell us the whole spiel, the whole story.
You want me to go first? So
up to you.
Well, I'll tell you from my perspective then, and then Jaideep can rebut. So, first of all, I want to thank Alan for having us and thank the Hasbara Fellows for joining us. This is the first of actually several sessions Jaideep and I are doing in various contexts this week, but this is a very special and important to me because I think that I only became aware actually in the last couple of months that as I had more and more conversations with friends in the US, that I don't think that people have actually internalized the significance and the profound nature of the Abraham Accords. And I can imagine why. One is obviously COVID is an enormous weight on everyone's mind and distraction. And as Alan said, certainly that will be the first thing that comes to mind years from now when people talk about 2020. But I don't think that the Abraham Accords will be far behind, actually. And I also, recognize that there are those who have either implicitly or explicitly tried to minimize their significance because to talk about how important they are, might be to give credit to political leaders that they don't want to give any credit to, which is something I can have some sympathy for, but nonetheless, I think it should not distract from the really important nature of this. And I think your jobs as kind of ambassadors should be to spread the word about how this is. And I hope that this conversation will help inspire you to do that. So just a very, very quick background on myself. I, as you might guess, am not originally Israeli. I spent most of my life in the New York area. I went to college in Boston at Tufts and graduate school in Northwestern Chicago. I've been involved in politics a long time in the US. I was associated with 3 presidential campaigns, 2 with one party and 1 with the other, just to keep you guessing. And I've been in the investment world for a long time. But in the 2000s, I got very passionate about electric transportation, not just as a business, but I began to think that from a macroeconomic and security point of view, it was important to diversify fuel. And 97% of transportation is run by oil. And I came to understand that the only scalable way to break the monopoly that oil has in transportation is through electrification. And the more I understood it, the more I became convinced that it was ultimately inevitable. I started an organization in Washington, D.C. to actually help promote that idea, and it's still going and still doing great work. You know, in 2007, I decided I'm going to effectively bet the rest of my career on electric transportation. I met two guys who were about my age and had similar conviction about electric and had two very different bold ideas. And to be perfectly frank, I picked the wrong one. So I picked the Israeli, which was Shai Agassi, and turned down Elon Musk. So if that ends my credibility for you, you can tune out now. But subsequent to, some of you may know, Shai Agassi founded a company called Better Place. It's the introduction of the book Startup Nation. And we went about 5 years, spent about $1 billion, and ultimately blew up. I won't get into all of that now. But subsequent to that, came to Israel and really began to help some of the companies that became Israel's mobility innovation boom in the 2010s. And you might be familiar with some of those companies like Mobileye, that was Israel's largest acquisition, $15 billion, like Waze, that's ubiquitous, obviously, and Move It, and many others. But there were hundreds of startups in automotive and mobility in Israel over the last decade. And that was a surprise to me when I arrived. And there hadn't been a lot of people in Israel that had spent time with car companies as I had during those days with a Better Place with Agassi. And so I kind of became in demand, and I kind of met a lot of these founders and started doing some angel investing. That led to a fund. So now I manage a fund out of Tel Aviv that invests in mobility. And while our first fund focused mostly on Israel and on the deep technologies that Israel's good at, our second fund that we closed a couple of years ago, we decided to get more into the global mobility picture and to focus more on consumer businesses and things that actually touch people's lives more directly. And you know, right around that time, you guys might recall that companies like Bird and Lime started to make a lot of waves, including right here. And in fact, right outside my office, we have basically a highway of kick scooters that go by. We were at 4 different operators, and I got my helmet right here. And if I want to get around Tel Aviv, that's pretty much the only way that I get around Tel Aviv. So we really believed in the business, but you know, the magnitude of the money that those early companies were raising was beyond our capacity to invest. But we kept our eye on that business, and that brings us to this past late summer. And I'll tell you, I happen to have been in the U.S. when the Abraham Accords were announced, and I saw the news alert. I actually have a friend who was in the U.S. Embassy who I called right away. But my first instinct was, you know, oh, this is good. You know, we got peace with Jordan, we got peace with Egypt, and now we'll have peace with UAE. It didn't take long for me to be disabused of the notion that this was going to be anything like those peace. We're very grateful to have peace with those other countries. We're very grateful that we don't have wars with them and we have some cooperation. But we don't have tourism. We don't have commerce in any meaningful sense. And we don't have people-to-people relationships for the most part. I have some friends in Jordan, but within 24 hours of the announcement in August, I had a dozen LinkedIn invitations from, it's the motorcycles of Tel Aviv, a dozen LinkedIn invitations from people in the UAE. And they were people with whom I had lots of mutual connections and who were in industries similar to mine and who were really interesting, and really right away started developing these person-to-person relationships within just a very short time of that we got over our website, as we do every day, many dozens of companies. We got one from Dubai, and you know that got our attention. And it came a couple weeks, I think a couple weeks after the announcement, but before the signing in Washington. And it came, I think, on the day that I was asked by a friend to join him on a visit to Dubai. And I said, well, this is convenient. I said, ordinarily I'd have, you know, a much higher bar to do a couple of calls with the company. Is it worth doing a meeting? But I hadn't done an in-person meeting in many months anyway, and now I was going to Dubai, and I was like, if it's even the least bit credible, I'll meet the guy. So I had breakfast with Jaydeep in Dubai, which a year earlier, would have been unthinkable because of the political situation, and and a month earlier for me would have been unthinkable because of the COVID situation. But somehow we threaded the needle, and we met, and everything that we understood about scooters, which we can get into the business, was kind of we were like, it works in Tel Aviv, and boy, the places where Jaydeep is planning to deploy these have a lot of those same characteristics. So we think it'll work there too. And it wasn't very long after that we returned to remote, but it didn't take us very long to come to I probably went on way too long with that story, but I'll let Jaydeep tell the version now.
We wanted to hear the story. And so Jaydeep, so it started with the LinkedIn invite, or you're really going on Michael's website then and contacting them, right? And so you tell us from your perspective then, Jaydeep, did the Abraham Accords have to be signed before you started researching Israeli firms to do business with? Did you kind of have your eye on Maniv Mobility before? How does it go from your perspective?
Well, it's good to know that the bar was very low for a meeting. You never told me that one, okay?
Because you know what happened next, so that's why I can say that.
No, first of all, thank you everyone for having me here. Thank you, Hasbro Fellows, as well. It's a great honor and privilege to share this story, and we're very proud to be a small piece of this, significant milestone in the region. And maybe I'll give you my brief intro as well, and then I'll talk about the dynamics of how this transpired. Right. So I'm not Emirati. Actually, I'm Indian American, but I moved to Dubai in '97. I went to high school here, and my parents have been here almost a quarter century now, 24 years. I've been in and out, and I spent about 11 years in Dubai. I've been working in mobility for a while, right? And been fortunate to work in a few different tech ecosystems as well, right? In the Valley and in India and Southeast Asia, right? I was with Kareem, which is kind of the regional ride-hailing champion that Uber acquired for 3.1 billion. And then I was with Grab in Southeast Asia, and that's when I got into micromobility. Then moved back to Dubai to kind of create the category in this region. And I think there's different lens of the Abraham Accords. I will share like one lens, right, in relation to being an entrepreneur in the Middle East, right, and this is a market that I think that the tech ecosystem is still quite nascent, right? It's nowhere near as mature as some of the other emerging markets that I've worked in, and next door Israel either, right? And so one of there are many things you look for in an ecosystem, and many critical factors to the flywheel, right? Talent, capital, like mentor, know-how, conducive business environment, etc. Right, and many of those factors are still developing here in the Middle East, right, and in the UAE, right. And so when we sought out to start this micromobility business, right, shared electric kick scooters, right, we had quite a high hurdle to overcome, because it's not like other software businesses. It has a much higher capital requirement, right, to get started, and there are just not a lot of venture investors in this region, experienced in this domain with the comfort level to, invest, this sizable, check for like a pre-product company. So I guess, Mike, what I'm saying is we had a low bar as well. We were just looking for who will sign the check.
So I think you're both sounds like you're both saying, it was business first. You were looking for the right business partner and it worked, which is a statement in and of itself. There wasn't
I'll tell you, my
Is
team
that
knew me
correct?
well. My team knew me well enough to know that I was biased in that I really wanted to do the deal for the political reasons, right? And to be the first and all that. But they fortunately held my feet to the fire. And when we went through, like any other company that we would diligence, and we only end up funding maybe like 1 in 100 companies that we see. But this was that one.
Let me ask about the human side when you first met, right? I mean, we're reading, we saw the articles about your deal, right? The first Israeli investment in an Emirati startup, and it's historic. But when you met, did it feel like two guys who both lived in New York in the past? Did you talk about which train you took and what bagel shop you went to? Was there that in common? Did that play a role? And if so, do you think such a quick deal would have been possible with a native Israeli, native Emirati? What role does the expat sort of background have to play here?
You want to go first, JD?
I mean, I think because it was still so new, right? This whole, peace settlement, right? There was on our end at least, right? A little bit of, I don't know, like almost not anxiety maybe isn't the right word, but like insecurity or unsureness of like what to expect when we meet, and like what can we talk about, right? What's like the right thing to say or the wrong thing to say. But I mean, like we hit it off, and I mean, from a domain perspective, right? There was so much I could learn from what Mike was sharing with his own experience, and I think.
Did we have a technical difficulty there on Jaydeep's side? Michael, do you still hear us?
I still hear you. I think maybe Jaydeep's internet slowed for a second. JD, pick it up about 10 seconds.
With us?
I think I'm back now. Sorry about that.
No problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it was the mobility domain where we really connected, right? And of course, there's a lot I learned from Mike, and we I think he was curious about the mobility landscape in the Gulf as well, and also like just the business climate in the UAE. So it was kind of like just curiosity, right? Learning about each other's domain, cultures and business environments, right? In that first meeting.
I should say also that JD brought one of his products, one of his scooters, into the hotel lobby. Actually invited me to try it out, but I had just come in actually from a run, and I'm used to running in the summers of Tel Aviv, but boy, that did not prepare me for running in the summer of Dubai, and so I declined to go back outside on a scooter, but I did appreciate seeing it in person. So that was kind of nice icebreaker, so to speak. But I'm pretty sure it was I landed the night before. It was literally my first meeting ever in UAE, and also like my first in-person business meeting in like 8 months at that point, which added just lots of layers of eeriness, I guess. But like Jaydeep said, all that dissipated very quickly because we had so much to talk about in the mobility domain, and we had so many kind of parallel experiences, and looked at things I think in many ways very similarly. So it was a great way to sort of break into doing business there.
And was there any connection or any? I mean, it sounded like from what you said, Michael, you got all these LinkedIn requests the day after the accords were signed, but were there business connections that you know of kind of under the table? I mean, we know for years we read reports of politicians meeting, somewhat on purpose, kind of seemed like an accident, kind of seemed on purpose. They would meet while abroad to, for the media to pick it up. And there were these signals that the politicians were starting to work together. What about in the business community? Was there any of that?
Right.
And if not,
I had many friends in the American Jewish community who did lots of business in the Gulf and were regularly going there. It never really occurred to me to try to do that to the one end. But after I was living in Israel, I actually, I didn't feel like I really wanted to go to some place where I couldn't go on my Israeli passport. But yeah, of course, I've subsequently actually become friendly, and in fact, JD and I've had a couple of calls with the Israeli diplomatic corps that is arriving in the Gulf, and they've introduced me to some of the folks that have the interesting portfolio of speaking in countries that Israel doesn't yet have relations with, and so I wasn't naive to the fact that obviously there's a lot going on, but to be able to do everything out in the open, just really makes it much easier.
Mm-hmm. And JD, do you have anything to say about that? Were you sort of looking at Israeli funds before the Accords, or did the Accords kind of just light a light bulb in your head?
Actually, I mean, like having grown up here, I mean, it was like taboo to even talk about Israel, right? And was never even considered in the universe of partner opportunities, right? And I mean, I think it was just, I don't know why it entered my mind. Like after the courts were signed, I was like, maybe it's worth like, I mean, there's a lot going on there. Like we're checking it out, and it kind of worked out. But I think when you see like what the feedback has been or the reception has been right here in UAE and in the Gulf, right, it's been extremely positive. And I think what we see is like with collaboration, there's like far better understanding, right, and appreciation, right, as opposed to isolation, right, which is a very, very healthy dynamic, right. I think quickly, we've seen that so many opportunities for, I guess, sharing of best practices and ideas and capabilities, right, and synergies actually between like UAE and Israel and even other countries here, and so like amongst the Emirati population, like it's actually a very positive association for our company Phoenix, right, to have been the first to get an Israeli-based VC investment.
And by the way, I should add there that when it became clear that like we were going to work this out and the deal was going to happen, and it became time to start talking about public relations around the deal, which we do around some deals we do, some deals we don't, depending strategically what makes sense. But here it was clear we wanted to. But I said to JD, maybe I don't know how you feel about this. I don't want to be presumptuous. I know we're also going into markets, frankly, in countries where Israel doesn't have relations. And if you think it's better to sort of downplay this, anyone can find out because it's all public information anyway. But the question was, are we going to emphasize this? Are we going to make a big deal about it? And he said to me without hesitation, absolutely. We're very proud to be associated with this and with the Accords and showing the fruits of it. And it was I was so glad to hear it because I was excited to make a big deal out of it too. And I think the other part of the story is that there was a caricature that maybe still around a little bit that when we talked about business between Israel and UAE, it's like sovereign wealth money into startup nation. And really, before any of that had an opportunity to get going, for this to be the kind of first announcement of a business deal between the countries, it was a very sort of man bites dog story that I think I've been thanked by many people actually for the public demonstration of the fact that there's a two-way street.
So let me, and I want to isolate a couple of the things you said there to both of you. And let me, JD, first, you were happy to make this public. And we've seen you in the press, and there have been articles about your business deal and so forth. But and I guess we're happy to hear it too, and Michael was happy to hear it. But was there anybody in your inner circle, any advisors, anyone in your company who said, JD, be careful. Don't go, you want to do business with Israel, fine, but don't make it too public. Was there anything inside you or in your organization that said, hold on?
Of course. Of course. It's never been done before, right? No one knew what was going to happen, right? I had a little trepidation, right? People telling me about it, right? But I guess the like intrinsically, I mean, I know that this is the right thing to be done, right? And we hope that the first few can make it more acceptable, right? And less newsworthy, right? That we're not celebrating the fact that it's Israel and UAE. We're celebrating just the company itself, right? So I firmly believe this is a huge positive opportunity for this region. It's needed, right? We kind of destroy ourselves, right? And I actually think there's a lot that the rest of the Middle East can gain from the tech ecosystem in Israel, right? It's actually they're not close at all, right? It's a huge gulf, right? Talk about the capital flows, right? The sovereign wealth funds don't really deploy much capital in the venture ecosystem in this region. I think the VC dollars is maybe 0.2% or something. It's one of GDP, which is 1/10 of what you see in the US. Right? So I think there's actually a lot more venture capital in Israel. There's actually a lot more experienced venture firms in Israel. There's a lot of great talent in Israel. There's a lot of successful exits there, right? And companies that have gone global, right? Any startup here in the Middle East is primarily focused on the domestic market, right? And now those Israeli companies can even look at the domestic Middle East market, right? A market that they were not really able to tap into previously. So I think as an entrepreneur here, we can really gain a lot, and that's part of the narrative that I'm trying to highlight, right? For other entrepreneurs and startups that if we want to transform the economies here and move on from the oil dependency, right? I mean, even Saudi and elsewhere, right? They have ambitious plans, and they're trying to incubate a tech ecosystem, right? Hey, there's the second biggest ecosystem in the world right next door, right? Why not integrate that system with this system and have a stronger ecosystem here?
Makes sense. And actually, I'll ask actually two more questions, and then we'll open it up to everyone. And I think, JD, it sounds like what you're getting at is or at one point you said it should be not about the UAE and Israel, but about the company. I mean, we hopefully one day this type of business deal will be as normal as an American company and a Canadian company. You don't see headlines when those kinds of business deals are made, right? I think that's we can all hope for that. But nevertheless, it's a positive thing that this was the first ever. And I think from our perspective as the Hasbara Fellows, we're thinking about the geopolitical issues. We're thinking about that more than the business side of it, as interesting as the business side of it is. But which leads me to just kind of two final questions, and we'll open it up. Which is, one is, and maybe this is more for Michael, but why is this peace agreement different? I mean, there's Jordanian and Egyptian peace agreements didn't quite. We don't see this kind of cooperation. Certainly not this fast. Maybe it'll happen. 40 years later after signing the Camp David Accords, but with Abraham Accords, it was 24 hours later, like you said. Why was this one different? And what about the other peace agreements in the region? Have you seen anything from your experience in the Israeli business community to embrace Morocco or Sudan? I think I know the answer, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say. And then I'll stop here. I'll ask you my final question after that.
I don't think there's any great mystery to your first question. It's I think just the similarities of the economies of they're obviously very different economies, but they're similar size populations, um, uh, and just a lot of ambition. You look at the pictures of Dubai 40 years ago and today, it's remarkable. Same as with Tel Aviv. So and the people to people, a piece of it, I think is just there's just a lot more in common. I think, and a lot more ambition and innovative thinking, and so there really has been, I think it's just a tremendous meeting. And I should add that sort of even beyond the business world, I'm lucky enough to be part of a group on a messaging app where early on someone put together like 20 Israelis and 20 Emiratis, and now we're up to like probably 50 from each side. And I check in with it every now and then, but it goes constantly. And there's really no topic that's off bounds. The political developments of the day. We celebrate life cycle events of each other, and on Friday now, a lot of Emiratis have gotten into sending pictures of challahs that they're baking, that they've gotten recipes from their counterparts in Israel. So there's a tremendous cultural piece to it. One other thing I might highlight that I was thinking about when JD was talking is that, if you read the book Startup Nation, one of the reasons that it speculates for Israel's success and innovation is that it's a nation of immigrants. And in the US, we see the same thing. A lot of the most important and most successful companies in the US are founded by immigrants or children of immigrants. And, I think that there's an analogy here as well. As JD said, he came to Dubai. There are many people who come from somewhere else and bring something, are able to sort of blend into the landscape in a way that they can see some things a little bit different and contribute in an innovative way. So, and in terms of the other countries, certainly Bahrain, it seems to me to be very, very similar to UAE in terms of its embrace of Israel. That we have a lot of Bahrainis also in that group. I look forward to visiting there. I don't think we've seen any companies out of there, but I'd certainly welcome that. As far as Morocco is actually one country I had been to before a few years ago with a friend for a few days, and there I think the Israel connection is just that there are so many Israelis that are of Moroccan descent, and still a family there, and so that's I think the biggest piece of that agreement. I don't yet have any real business network there, but obviously open to that. And Sudan, as I heard someone say recently, it's a little bit more of a U.S. Sudan situation than it is an Israel Sudan situation right now. But we have hopes for everywhere to come into the family of innovation and business.
Great, and finally, I'll ask you sort of the political question that's I think on all of our minds as Hasbara Fellows, and that's, what does this mean for the countries that still don't have relations with Israel? What does it mean for the Palestinians? I know, we've read many articles and a lot of analysis about it, but I think maybe to put the question, a finer point on the question, we at Hasbara have been preoccupied with fighting this notion and this movement to boycott Israel on college campuses. And along come the Abraham Accords, and suddenly seems like we could use it to delegitimize the delegitimizers, and those who say boycott Israel are,
I'll tell you,
so.
I noticed a week or two ago that it came up in one of my feeds that a year earlier I had made a trip someone invited me to Ruabi, which is this Palestinian city that is trying to actually lean in on innovation on tech, and they have a business center there that I visited where there are a lot of Palestinians working on projects for Israeli companies, many of whom I was familiar with, and I was really taken by the experience. I still try to find some of my portfolio companies that need their services, and hope that we can match them at some point. Maybe even Phoenix can use some of the outsourced services of the Palestinians in Ruabi. at some point. But you know, on the one hand, I'd say I left there more hopeful, and you know, on the other, I'd say, you know, one of the things that the Abraham Accords you know, drove home is that you know, it's you know, I think we're not there yet with the Palestinians. They don't they, you know, I think they at least have not been able to put forth a leadership that recognizes that we're a permanent part of the landscape and we have a right to be here. And I hope that, you know, one of the things that the Abraham Accords can do is to help them understand that yeah, I think even for a lot of Israelis, there was a legitimization that came with the Abraham Accords that gave a greater sense of security in our long-term future here. Seeing you know, a successful Arab country, you know, not just recognize us, but embrace us in the way that it has. And you know, I do really hope that it will change the dynamic between us and the Palestinians and allow us to finally settle that dispute and move on to more productive things like starting companies together.
Great. Jaideep, anything to add, or should we open up to Q&A?
I mean, I think Mike summarized, you know, I think has a deeper perspective on this, and he summarized it quite well. I think all I would also add is that, like I shared before, you know, I think collaboration develops better understanding, right? And isolation and delegitimizing existence is dehumanizing, right? So there's a lot of gains to working together, right? Israeli companies have created, you know, a whole range of innovations that most people don't even know, right? I think it's hard to boycott Israel, right? Because you got to boycott a lot of stuff, actually.
That is true. And so let's open up to Q&A here. And I think Allison has the first question. If I could ask everyone who's asking a question just to introduce yourself. And if you have a question, you just click participants on the bottom. A little window will pop up, and there's a raise hand button. So you can just raise your hand. And like I said, we have the email questions available as well. mandel@hasbarafellowships.org if you want to email the question. Or you can ask it in the chat of the Zoom. So Allison, are you ready?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. It's been really insightful to hear about everything that you are doing together with your company. And I just wanted to ask, you know, from, you know, the context or the perspective of a college student, which I think many people on the call are, and thinking about Israel advocacy, how can we take the message of what you two are doing and bringing that to our campus to show how there are ways to make peace through economics, through economic innovation?
Allison, where are you?
I'm in Connecticut.
You go to college there?
I go to Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts, so not too far from Tufts, but currently remote in Connecticut, doing school here.
I took a couple classes at Brandeis when I was at Tufts, actually. JD, do you want to take that, or?
And I think maybe you can give it a stab.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, I think it's not difficult to sort of highlight our collaboration as an example here. You know, there's lots of nice articles about it. You can also JD's team produces some terrific you know, animated videos and things about their product, and it's something I think very relatable to young people, which is a big part of our customer base, as you've guessed. So you know, it's maybe a tangible way to show people that you know, this is real, and that this is you know, I do think like we said before about 2020, it may primarily be made for COVID, but really it may also be the hinge moment when peace in the Middle East became a reality, beginning with the Abraham Accord and the UAE-Israel agreement, and moving on from there, as it did now with several other countries, and we certainly hope that there are more that are going to join soon. So the more that you can highlight that story, I think the better understanding people will have.
Thank you. Next question is from Sammy Freeman.
Hello, my name's Sammy Freeman. I'm a Hasbro Fellow at Yeshiva University in New York. And first and foremost, I just want to say thank you guys for taking the time speaking to us. It was amazing to hear from the two people who brainchild this frankly historic deal. And some pieces which you guys had mentioned, for example, Jaydeep had mentioned about and I hope I'm saying this right, the collaboration spurring the understanding. And I know Michael had mentioned about there's a cultural piece to this whole aspect. And so taking a focus on that for just a moment, while unfortunately, there's been throughout history not the best social and cultural relationship between Israel and the UAE. And as you guys have alluded to, the taboos of not having, and the people within your organizations who might not want the deal to go through. But do the two of you feel that these kind of economic relationships themselves can help rebuild that cultural divide? Or do you think that there should be other specifically cultural bridges built within the economic lens to rebuild the culture, which can then itself spur on more economic relationships?
Yeah, I'm not sure that there was ever any hostility between the countries. Actually, there was just this taboo in the region, and to be honest, I was very ignorant of UAE and the whole Gulf region. I kind of knew a bit about Saudi Arabia and not a lot about these countries that we now have this peace with. But I think absolutely all the things you're touching on, from economic cooperation and cultural exchange, and I should say also that during the Hanukkah period, when there was vacation in Israel, and it seemed as if anyway that we were in a COVID lull. There were tens of thousands of Israelis who traveled to Dubai, and I know that as soon as we get past this, the number of flights that have been approved for between Tel Aviv and Dubai, Tel Aviv and Abu Dhabi, they are kind of stunning. It's like basically reminds me of the New York Boston shuttle that I took as a student. With like every hour, but that's really how it's going to be, and I have no doubt that is going to just continue to increase the ties between the countries, business, cultural, tourism, etc.
Yeah. And of course, codependence sparks a healthy collaboration. So I think the more connections we make, the better.
Thank you. I see Griffin's hand raised here virtually. His blue hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys first and foremost. This has been a really informative talk, and I found it very interesting. My question is, whenever you guys are discussing, maybe it's not as much of an issue since both of you all lived in America, but what is the lingua franca, the language of business between Israel and the UAE? Is there going to be a reliance on Israelis that know Arabic, or is it all going to take place in English, do you think?
I think most business here is done in English. I guess it depends on the individual, right? But it is a very expat friendly country, and so most business is done in English. But of course, there are some pockets of Emirati families and things who prefer to speak in Arabic. So, I think it's not a requirement, right? But it's nice.
I'd say first of all, having come to Israel at an advanced age, my Hebrew is not that good, and so I'm hoping that maybe JD and I will learn together Hebrew. We can do that. But on a serious note, I think there's an opportunity here also, because most things are in English. I'd say in the business world in general, we have companies actually now in 7 countries, and everything, thankfully for me, is pretty much English. But there is an opportunity here, I think, for the Israeli Arab world to, we've been trying to integrate more of the Israeli Arab community into the tech scene in Startup Nation, and it might be that this opens some opportunities for them, and maybe even, please God, soon for the Palestinians to be able to engage in helping build up their participation in the Israeli economy through doing a commerce in their native language with UAE.
Second quick question: Are either of y'all looking for interns for this summer? I'd love to come work for y'all.
If you can get here. I don't know if we are, JD. What about you?
We're definitely looking for talent, right? So I guess reach out, share your resume, and see. And that goes for anyone on this call.
Jaideep, does talent mean once you graduate college, or would you take a summer intern?
Interns are good. Yeah,
Interns are good too?
interns are good.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. Let's talk after as well. I mean, Griffin, you can reach out, he said, but I'll also talk to you to see if we can get you some more Hasbro fellows.
Okay.
Great. How we have Max? Do we have another question lined up?
Yeah, Elijah.
Yeah.
I believe
Elijah.
question.
Elijah, go ahead. If you could introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Elijah. I'm a Hasbro fellow at George Washington University. Believe it or not, I'm actually in Israel right now. I'm on a kibbutz studying Hebrew. And my question is that I have this vision that I want to create an event that not just promotes Israel to college students, because I feel like it can come off as a lot when you're specifically promoting the country as a whole. It could come off as very one-sided. What I would love to do is kind of go more to focus on the macro and promote Israel's tech sector, because I have this dream that if I can get one kid to think, you know what, I'm going to study abroad in Israel, or get a tech internship, or a science-related internship in Israel, or anything related to what they are interested in, that would be a huge achievement for me personally. So my question is, being as business people in the tech industry, what is your approach to trying to promote yourself to someone who may not know much about what you're doing?
You or myself?
I'm not sure I understand exactly where you're going with that, but I think in our case, we have a very deep focus in this one specific sector of mobility, which I'm happy and at some future date to talk more generally about. But that has the advantage of really narrowing the window. First of all, we don't have to learn about a lot of different things. A lot of the investors are generalists, and a lot are very good at it. I don't think I could ever be good at that, because I wouldn't be able to retain enough knowledge about so many things. But it also has the advantage, like JD referred to, that we were kind of speaking the same language right away, because we're both in the sector. And when he reached out, I saw his background, and vice versa. We were able to connect. So that's I hope that's responsive to your question. What part of Israel are you in?
I'm on Kibbutz Yagor. It's next to Haifa.
Very nice.
Yeah, very different from Tel Aviv, but it's nice.
We have time for one more question, and I think I'll ask it like this: What do you think is going to be when we look back 10 years from now, 20 years from now? You were the first deal of this kind, but what's going to be the story? I mean, are we going to have a lot of these deals? Are we going to see? And I know I'm asking you to do the impossible here by predicting, but are we going to see Emirati students walking around in Israel when we study abroad there? Are we will it be common for American Jews to be studying in Dubai and Abu Dhabi along with Israeli students? What give us your best guess, and then we'll I'll call you on it in 15, 20 years, see how close you are.
I don't think it's going to take 15 or 20 months until I hope we have Emirati students here in Israel. And I think there are already plenty of American Jewish students in Dubai. And there's a lovely little Jewish community there. I got to know a little bit, and I know it's going to grow. Even just this week, there was an announcement about a consortium of Jewish organizations in the Gulf that is being started. So I think all that's happening now. But I think I hope the answer to your question, first of all, I hope it's a much shorter time frame. But I think about something I don't know if JD I've talked about specifically, but Saudi Arabia is contemplating or maybe beginning to work on a brand new city called Neom, which is along the Red Sea, that is to be a very technologically advanced city, kind of built from the ground up, a major tourist attraction and a major center of commerce and innovation. And it's an interesting location that they picked for it because it's not far from the Jordanian border, and by an eVTOL, by an electric takeoff and landing vehicle, I think you could go from Eilat to there probably in 10 or 15 minutes. So it's very close to Israel as well, and to Egypt. So all four countries are really right in that area. So it's my hope that long before your time frame you laid out comes to sort of symbolize an opportunity that we all have to work together on an exciting project like that I think can attract people from all over the world to come visit all the countries and to spend time there. And I think that there are also going to be enormous opportunities for companies like JD's and for funds like mine to invest in things that are associated with the new modes of mobility. So when I think about kind of long term, since I've become familiar with this project, that's kind of the moonshot that I think about.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, and I'm completely on Mike's wavelength. I think like from afar, right, from the States, it's hard to really appreciate the velocity of connection that we've seen between Israel and UAE, at least, right? So I think there's going to be exceptionally fast coexistence, right? Especially once the COVID subsides. Right? There's so much travel that's going to happen between the countries. There's a lot of business that's going to happen, right? And joint, I guess, investments as well. It's not going to take 10 years. I mean, I think a year from now, already we were seeing a lot of Israelis in Dubai, right? And there's going to be a clear coexistence. It's beautiful.
That's really great, and that's a great note to end on there, Jaydeep. And the Hasbara Fellows, for those who've been on our missions to Israel pre-COVID days, we've seen the coexistence even with the closer neighbors, with the Palestinians, and we've been to the SodaStream factory and places like that where you have Palestinian workers who say to us, if the people on your campus succeed and boycott Israel, we're out of a job. We don't believe in that. We don't, and we've always sort of been able to say, that we've seen that coexistence is possible, and that building bridges is much better than boycotts. Bridges, not boycotts. That's the phrase we like. And this session has given us some more insight into that. And I hope that all the Hasbara Fellows on the line and those who watch the recording after, go back and share with your campuses that you saw this at work. Building bridges is possible, and the only people that don't want to do that are the Israel boycotters that we see on our campus. And so it's important to, I think, call them out for what they are. And I hope this session has given you the tools a little bit to do that. And really want to thank Jaydeep and thank Michael for taking the time. It's really, it means a lot that you take the time to speak to us. And we
JD, it's already 11 o'clock at night, so especially for him for staying up late.
That's right. Yes. And before we started, Jaydeep, I remarked, I thought you'd be in your pajamas, and looks like you're at the office with the whiteboard behind you. And we really appreciate you taking the time. 10 o'clock Dubai time, 8 o'clock in Tel Aviv. So actually now it's 11 o'clock in Dubai time, now that we've finished. So, so thank you. Thank you both so much. And we'll be announcing our next leadership sessions. We do them once a month. So we'll look out for the announcement for the March session. And have a happy Purim, Chag Sameach to everyone. And thank you so much. Have a great week, everybody. And thank you for joining.